Here's a nice small um, diatonic button accordion made by Hohner called the Preciosa. Uh, Quite small. I can span the keyboard with my large hands, but beautiful little instrument. This has been converted by someone else to DG. It actually has an internal bellows lock, so you push the button and it releases the internal bellows lock. So on this one, I did some restoration and tuning. This already had the valves done, and by whoever converted it to DG. So that was already done. It did have a number of leaking pallets, so it wasn't very airtight. I think there were 6 or 7 on the treble side, where the pallets were not sitting completely flat, and therefore causing them to leak even with no buttons pushed. And that's partly because the Hohner style of pallet and lever is they've got a metal, a stamped steel lever. There's a groove cut in the pallet, and then this pallet is glued onto the steel actuating lever. But what happens is either over time or if there's any movement, those pallets, especially on these very small instruments, aren't lying completely flat. I think I got pictures on the Preciosa before I took those pallets off. There were about 6, like I say, about 6 that were leaking. I took them off, cleaned them, and then re-glued them in place using hot glue, which is really a better glue for pallets because it remains flexible. In fact, I've got a little demonstrator here. And I can show a little video where I compared 3 different approaches to that pallet gluing. This is rigid glue. This is hot glue with a ball pivot. The movie sort of explains that. And then this is just hot glue by itself. So the hot glue is the rigid is the worst because it doesn't allow that pallet to sit completely flat. In my example, I caused a error by gluing it with a little shim under one side, but to see which of these methods was the most flexible, and hot glue with a little tiny ball pivot in it and ended up being best. Anyway, so I'll show a little movie on that test I did at this point. So here's the result after purposely trying to cause a leak by using a 0.5 millimeter shim under this edge. I got a picture of that while I was gluing these 3 pallets on. So here is some rigid glue, and as you can see, a gap remains. I can squeeze it out by sort of bending the metal, I suppose. Here's the one with hot glue, which is more flexible, and a little ball pivot underneath that steel rod actuator. That seems to be lying completely flat. Here's one where I used hot glue, same as that, but I don't have that ball pivot, so it's better than the rigid, but it's not as good as the one with the ball pivot. So this one really is much more forgiving of misalignment during gluing and over time. So I don't know if I can show that. So it really has some flexibility front to back, side to side, which means that even if this rod got bent a little, the pallet's still going to lay flat and give you a good seal. Well, the result is the pallets are tight and um, airtight, and of course they're so small on this that they're pretty quiet anyway. So what else did I do on this? The I did have to remove and work on a few of the reeds that weren't working properly. But the main challenge with these tiny ones is that flying bridge arrangement for on the treble side, where half of the reeds are glued onto the soundboard. The other half are on this cantilevered reed block that really completely obscures the reeds below, so you can't do the normal method um, of tuning everything in place with the reeds exactly where they are, because you don't have access to the half of the reeds on the treble side. So what I do, I think I got a picture of this. I put a piece of tape here, and note by note, I write down what the deviation from what I want is, and then with the instrument apart, I then tune those reeds, eliminate the deviation, put it all back together, and then at that point I still have access to the plus reeds, so I do any further required tuning just to those plus reeds. In this case, the instrument was tuned 0 plus rather than the Viennese style. And I didn't want these are very small, smaller than normal reeds. I don't have spares for those. They're 15 millimeters wide. So what I did is I captured what the current tuning was on all the reeds, and I took the average of all this. So it's 0 and plus. So these are right on pitch, although they really were. Here's a plus 7 cents, 9 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents. So I took an average of that column, which ended up being, I think, 4.6 or 4.4 cents, which equates to very close to A441. So the instrument really was tuned at A441, 0 plus, and I've left it that way. Instead of trying to change all these reeds back to 440, 440 and 441 are very close together. Anyway, so I did that, and using a recipe for about 1.5 hertz beat frequency on the low notes, up to about 6 on the highest notes. I'll go through them. This is still this is a club configuration. Slightly modified. I think the bass it has 2 minor chords, whereas normally it would be only 1 minor chord. Here's the bass and chords. So beautiful, small Hohner Preciosa, heading back to its owner. This is in DG. Thanks again to my friend John Peluso for providing this P84 microphone, which I use for my demo videos.